Israeli army tanks moved towards the center of Khan Yunis city after a night of artillery shelling around Gaza.
Battling the elements and defending troops, Ukrainian soldiers brace for another winter on the front line as residents in liberated villages hunker down. After November became the 6th warmest month in a row, the Copernicus Climate Service says 2023 is set to become the hottest year on record. Palestinian children pulling their belongings from the rubble in the devastated city of Khan Yunis, just 8 kilometres from Gaza's border crossing with Egypt. Israeli forces continue to carpet bomb the besieged enclave. They claim they are fighting Hamas fighters and senior officials.
والله إحنا في الليل كنا بأمان الله يعني ونايمين يعني بداية نوم وأطفال يعني البيت كله أغلبته أطفال وكله ستات كبيرة وصبايا ونايمين في أمان الله فجأة ما لقينا للقصف كله بنزل علينا.
Gaza's health ministry says more than 16,200 Palestinians, mostly women and children, have been killed in Israeli bombardments. The Kamal Adwan hospital, the last one serving the north, has stopped operating due to lack of fuel. The UN High Commissioner for Human Rights says Palestinians are living in utter terror. The IDF says it has struck approximately 250 targets in the Gaza Strip over the past 24 hours. Israel has vowed to destroy Hamas and free the 138 hostages still held.
As the IDF expands its operations to dismantle Hamas in Gaza, we have not lost sight, not for one moment, of our critical mission to rescue our hostages, to do everything in our power to bring our hostages home.
Meanwhile, Israel's military has released these pictures of what they are claiming to be the largest weapons cache found thus far in their ground offensive. Braced for the snow and Russian bullets, these Ukrainian soldiers, clad in winter camouflage, are participating in war games in the northern Chernihiv region. They are learning how to identify and repel enemy saboteurs.
І вважаю, що для кожного чоловіка, здравого, нормального чоловіка, що якщо він навіть там переживає в чому-то, боїться, йому стоїть прийти і навіть на цих навчаннях відпрацювати це все. Тобто воно закаляє.
More than 1 million Ukrainian and Russian soldiers are currently fighting in eastern Ukraine. In order to combat the freezing temperatures, a Dutch charity has donated purpose-made military kits to help defending troops survive.
Звичайно, що потрібно, тому що це бойові дії. Десь біжиш на штурм, йдеш в атаку, зацепив, порвав, розірвав, впав в болото. Тобто там не перебираєш, не вибираєш місце, де присісти, де лягти. Тобто лягаєш куди-небудь, весь в болоті, і потрібно щось мати для того, щоб переодягнутися.
Average temperatures in Kyiv range from minus 4.8 degrees Celsius to 2 degrees between December and March. While many Ukrainians have returned to liberated pockets of the country, they are now racing against the clock to rebuild their homes before winter really sets in.
As Ukraine remembers its war victims, President Volodymyr Zelensky has been rallying support at home and abroad for his country's struggle against Russian occupation. Walking from his office in Kyiv to a ceremony marking Armed Forces Day, he recorded a message of support.
А як інакше? Це наші землі, це наші люди. Хіба є альтернатива? Ні. Позаду 9 років і 651 день війни. Попереду перемога. А як інакше? Хіба може бути альтернатива?
Zelensky has toured several frontline posts in recent weeks to encourage his forces amid a stalled counteroffensive. He is also seeking to shore up support among Western allies, taking part in Wednesday's G7 leaders meeting. But a planned address to the US Senate to follow up September's visit has been cancelled. It was suddenly called off as Congress failed to pass the latest support package for Ukraine.
Russian President Vladimir Putin visits Saudi Arabia and the UAE as the war in Ukraine grinds on. Putin landed in the capital Abu Dhabi. It marked his first trip to the region since before the pandemic. He is also facing an arrest warrant from the International Criminal Court over the war in Ukraine. Neither Saudi Arabia nor the UAE has signed the ICC founding treaty, meaning they don't face any obligation to detain Putin over the warrant, accusing him of being personally responsible for the abduction of children from Ukraine during his war on the country. Putin will travel to Saudi Arabia and meet with powerful Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman on the one-day trip.
2023 is set to be the hottest year in history. Copernicus, the European Climate Change Service, says November was the sixth consecutive month to break records with an average temperature of 14.22 degrees. This as negotiators in Dubai prepare to wrap up their first week of talks at the United Nations Climate Change Summit. Additional data shows from January to November the average air temperature was 1.4 degrees above the pre-industrial average and 0.13 degrees higher than the 11-month average for 2016. The 2015 Paris Climate Agreement set a goal for limiting global warming to 1.5 degrees above pre-industrial temperatures over the long term, but is failing to reach this target. Scientists say human-caused climate change and the natural El Niño-La Niña cycle are the driving forces behind these records. Specifically, for Europe, the average temperature for September to November of this year was 10.96 degrees, 1.43 degrees above the recorded average. While diplomats and scientists are trying to find ways to reduce carbon emissions, the UN warns it is a little too late. Researchers at Copernicus warn as long as greenhouse gas levels keep rising, we can't expect different outcomes next year. Worse still, the temperature will keep rising while heat waves and droughts will become more frequent. Reaching net zero as soon as possible is vital to managing climate risks.
Negotiators at the COP28 summit have produced a new draft of what's expected to be the core document of the talks. The first global stocktake on climate looks at what's happened since the 2015 Paris Climate Agreement, how off track it is, and what can be done to correct things. The CEO of COP28, Adnan Amin, claims the stocktake will provide a very good basis for moving forward.
We need to be aligned with the 1.5 target, keeping 1.5 within reach. That we've articulated as the principal objective of this conference. To do that, there's going to have to be substantial progress on reducing emissions and creating a trajectory of decarbonization that brings us to alignment with 1.5 by 2030. We have 7 years to do this. So either we can stay mired in debates about language, or we can find practical ways to get this done.
Protesters near the COP28 venue are not optimistic. They say what is being done to phase out fossil fuels, a main driver of global warming, is not enough.
People's frustration levels are really high about these conferences. In fact, some have lost any hope in this process. But we are here because we believe we cannot solve the problem if governments do not act. That is our problem. It's not just up to us. The governments, those who in power, have to do something. So we are here to push them.
Activists are pushing for a complete phasing out of fossil fuels. It is ambitious, but they say it is the only way to meet our climate warming crisis.
Kilometres of barbed wire dividing what was once an open land border. Similar fences have been erected on the boundaries of Austria, Hungary, Italy and Slovenia amid heightening security concerns over the flow of illegal migrants. Meanwhile, Slovenia's former Prime Minister Janez Janša has called Europeans to, quote, arm themselves, but intellectuals have accused the conservative politician of xenophobia.
Ta izjava je skandalozna. Kaže, on je kao duhovit, jel to ono, čivija. Oružajte se, ali naoružajte se, ali legalno. Šta znači legalno? Potpuno je svejedno. Ako se naoružavate, potpuno je svejedno da li ilegalno ili legalno, jel?
Ljubljana has recorded 3 times the number of illegal border crossings this year compared to last year. In an interview with Euronews Serbia, Janša defended his anti-immigration views and urged Slovenians to take a stand.
Actually, this was not a statement as a reaction after the war or this terrorist attack in Ukraine. It was a statement addressing the whole situation which we are facing and the current security situation in Slovenia and our abilities to defend ourselves as a country.
According to Europe's border agency Frontex, this migratory route, which crosses Bosnia, Croatia, Slovenia and Italy, is particularly popular amongst Syrian and Afghan refugees.
Ima to efekt na život ljudi koji su to. Jer kada ti sad zoveš nekoga, tražem stan za prijatelja iz Sirije, a svi sada samo vidu teroristi, taj čovjek nema šanse da dobije stan.
Italy established controls at its border with Slovenia last October. As a consequence, Ljubljana reinforced its boundary with Croatia.
Former UK Prime Minister Boris Johnson is expected to face 2 days of questioning in front of an inquiry looking into the country's response to the coronavirus pandemic. Johnson stepped down as PM in September 2022 following revelations of lockdown rule-breaking parties at his Downing Street residence. He agreed to hold a public inquiry after heavy pressure from bereaved families who also testified.